Yo man, I don't know if you saw this, but some crybaby called your mod starfall build a D tier build. Yeah, exactly, like D for damn fun, exactly what I said in the video. No, you idiot, D as in A, B, C, D, dumb. It seems like the fun police and some of the community don't really like starfall. You know what you're gonna have to do, right? Make another starfall video. I've been working on a new one. I've basically got all the pieces I need. What? No, that's not what I meant at all. Okay, cool, chat to you later. I'm building it now. Thanks for the idea, man.
A few moments later.
Alrighty, so let's quickly look underneath the hood and see what makes this build purr. But first and foremost, we should be using Archon as our prime archetype, and that's really because we want Tempest, which is the prime perk. This gives us mod power regeneration, and every time when we use a mod, it actually increases our mod generation as well. So as long as you're in a fight and you're constantly using mods, you're just going to keep bolstering up your mod generation, and that's kind of like how you keep getting access to mods over and over and over as fast as you do, obviously in combination with some of the amulets and rings and stuff like that we're going to look at. We also want Amplify, because Amplify is the damage perk for the Archon subclass, and this basically gives you 50% additional mod damage and gives you 10% mod critical chance. If you are playing a mod build, you kind of like have to include Archon in at least for this perk because it's just that good. When it comes to the skill, I tend to use Reality Rune here just to give myself a little bit more survivability. Once you pop this, it slows down any projectiles that are coming in. You're taking a huge amount of less damage inside here. And since we already are quite tanky, it really does help us to survive even an insane amount of incoming damage. And then last but not least, the trait itself here is Flash Caster, which is not that great, but this essentially increases our mod and skill casting speed by 50%. Which definitely does benefit us. We're able to shoot those mods out faster, but overall, I mean, not that big a deal. Now we are combining this with the summoner archetype, and that's really, I would say, probably the best setup for this. Shout out to the medic archetype, which absolutely can work as well, and I'm sure is an option. But specifically for me, I enjoy the summoner due to the fact that you have the minions, and these minions of course can also sometimes, you know, take aggro away from you and get you out of tough situations, maybe, you know, getting an enemy to concentrate on them a little bit more. And essentially, as long as you have these minions summoned, whether you're using the hollow minion, please don't use the hollow minion, or the flyers or the reaver. Now if you're using the flyers, this is well suited for situations where you're not in tight corridors, where they can actually hover a little bit higher and get their shots in. And if you are in tight corridors and stuff like that, then absolutely use the reaver. But generally speaking, I tend to have the flyers out. And as long as you have one alive minion out, you benefit from the Dominator perk here, which increases our mod and skill damage by 35% and also gives us some crit as well for our mod and skills of 5%. Now the other cool thing as well is that if these minions die, they leave behind a little pool that regenerates you. And if you use a relic, it actually, you know, makes them deal a little bit more damage and things like that as well. So there are ways for you to essentially stack up a little bit of additional damage on these. The regrowth is our archetype trait over here. This gives us 1.5 per second health regeneration, which is pretty good. This is usually a trait that I pick up in any case in the trait tree, so this is really good to have this included for us. Then moving us over to the character tree, and maybe I can just move my face over here. I'm using the Leto Mark II helm, as well as the Leto Mark II chest, as well as the Leto Mark II leggings. And then I'm combining that with the Labyrinth gauntlets. This gives me overall the highest amount of armor as a configuration that I can get. And then that overall, if we look at the stats here, puts us round about close to like 68% of damage reduction. Now there's a couple of other things that actually add to this damage reduction, of course, but we'll get to that just now. But this is essentially what we're looking at here. It gives us a flat armor of 363. We have some decent resistances as well. Of course, the fire resistance is heavily boosted up because of one of the rings that we're wearing, which of course we'll look at as well. But overall, this makes us super tanky and damage resistant. but we do have a weight of 90, which puts us on the flop penalty side, meaning that if we try to dodge, we're actually going to fail the dodge and we're going to fall on our stomachs. So we are going to have to find a way to deal with that, which we absolutely will. Now, moving us over to the Relic, Tranquil Heart tends to be on my characters a lot. I just like the idea of having this passive 2 health regeneration active at all times. It's really good. But the other thing as well is that when you then use this Relic, it actually doubles your health regeneration, all health regeneration. And since we have quite a bit of health regeneration built into this character already, it actually is quite beneficial. Now on here, I have the following sort of runes like stacked in here, or shards, whatever you want to call them. Of course, I've got the mythic variants, whatever quality you have, you can use here. I've got elemental damage on here because we are going to be dealing a lot of fire damage, and that's going to benefit the fire ticks. I'm using mod damage on here because, of course, this is a mod build, and mods is really where our damage comes from. We're not really trying to shoot stuff to death. We're trying to kill them with mods. And then I just give myself even a little bit more survivability here by putting 15% armor on here, which actually increases our armor over here, this 363, by another 15%. And because we have so much armor, 15% actually means quite a lot. So if you wanted to go more offensive, you could absolutely swap that armor effectiveness out with something else. But this is kind of like a well-rounded setup. And the other thing that I really like about this build, despite the fact that I get to use mods and I get to use Firestorm and Starfall, which I really enjoy, is the fact that this plays so super comfortable. You kind of like never really go into the red zone where you have a fear that you're going to die or something like that. Of course, you can die. I mean, it's not impossible. But you can play this kind of fairly loose. And as long as you keep dealing mod damage, you're going to be healing so much as well that you're not really going to die. Then, of course, onto the weapons and really the meat and potatoes of this build. My boy Sagittarius is in here. This is, of course, giving you Starfall. Now, the idea of this particular iteration of this build is massive AoEs. So we're going to try and make Starfall even better by making it hit a larger area. But Starfall itself, essentially how it works is you activate the mod, you shoot it, it hits something, it opens a portal, and these sort of stars start falling out of it, and they deal damage, of course. Now, we're coupling Harmonizer with this because this increases the mod damage of these stars as they fall by 20%. But then also at the level 10, this generates 25% additional mod power for Stowed Weapon. So then in the melee slot here, guys, I mean, you could use anything here. You can use a spear, a walking stick, a fucking fly swatter. It doesn't matter because I hardly ever use this. I have Kralax on here because I kind of like carry that around everywhere with me, but really it doesn't matter what you put on here. If you want to sort of get something in here that gives you ammo back or gives you lifesteal or something like that, there are some options that you can throw in here, but really it doesn't really matter. Then going over to our handgun, our secondary slot, I'm using the MP60R, the submachine gun, the Uzi, whatever you want to call it, over here. And we're putting Firestorm in there. Remember, I said massive AoEs. So that your best option when you're talking massive AoEs is Firestorm. Now, Firestorm, what it does is you shoot this pellet and it kind of flies with an arc, and when it explodes, it creates this like suck vortex that pulls enemies in and applies burn to them that ticks in on them and essentially kills them. Now, the other benefit that Firestorm has, and the real reason why I decided to pair this with Starfall, is that Firestorm addresses a general problem that you might potentially have with Starfall, and that is that oftentimes when you are fighting an enemy, you shoot the Starfall and then the enemy walks through it, takes 1 or 2 hits from the Starfall and then walks out from under it, and then that Starfall is kind of like useless. So we want to find a way that we can get enemies to spend some more time inside those Starfalls and actually take more damage from them. Now, enter, of course, Firestorm, because Firestorm, yeah, I mean, of course, you can pre-fire the Starfall into the ground to force an enemy to walk through it and maybe take more damage. But ideally, what you want is you want to create a situation where you can trap an enemy and have them take the full damage of the Starfall. And again, as mentioned, Firestorm is your best bet here because this suck zone that it creates essentially pulls little enemies to the middle, aka it pulls them right into a nice little kill box that the Starfall can drop on top of. On the other side as well, Firestorm oftentimes locks down melee enemies or enemies that are quite large and trying to move around the battlefield very effectively. So a side win to this build is basically the fact that a lot of the bosses in the game become very manageable because you can trap them with this Firestorm suck cyclone and they can't do anything to you. Now we do put feedback in here because this helps us generate 20% of single charge value as passive mod power every time you use the mod. And then the level 10 on here says that mod damage generates 10% of damage dealt as mod power as well. So both of these are very effective at reloading themselves very fast, especially combined with the amulet and the rings that we're going to use. So we're going to be able to use these mods every time on cooldown. We don't have to wait for them to come back or anything like that. And that's really where the power of the build comes from. The amulet and rings are then the final part of the puzzle here, really. And in the case of the amulet, what we're using is detonation trigger. Now, that's because starfall, its effect, right? Those stars that fall actually count as explosions. So this is actually going to increase the damage of those stars by 25%. But what it's also going to do is it's actually going to make those stars cause the enemies that it hits to burn. So they're also going to take burning damage, which again fits into the whole theme of the build because we have firestorm already burning the shit out of everything. Now we have another way to introduce burn, and this is just overall really going to increase the damage profile of starfall. Now we're also putting burden of the destroyer on here since we don't really care about ideal range or firefalls. Guys, I am sweating like hell over here. We don't really care about ideal range of firearms or anything like that since we're using mods to deal damage. So this will just increase all of our damage by 15%, which is a huge buff for us. It means all damage means the damage that we're actually getting from the mods, the damage that we're getting from the fire ticks, you know, all of that is increased by 15%. That's huge. Our second ring is burden of the follower, and this reduces our fire rate by 15%. Again, we don't give a shit. We don't want to be killing stuff by shooting at it. We want to be killing stuff by lobbing mods at it. So this increases our mod power generation by 50%, and this is a part of the, let's say, engine that keeps your mods refreshed the entire time and allows you to use them on cooldown the entire time. Our third ring is just benefiting our fire damage, our fire tick damage. Since we have two sources of that, we have the fire that comes from the starfall hitting from detonation trigger, and we also have the fire coming from firestorm. Now, both of these will be increased by 10%, and then the added benefit that we get is we also get 15 additional resistance to fire here. Now this in combination with one of the other traits we're going to take is how we can keep ourselves from getting killed by accidentally getting a firestorm tick on ourselves, because the firestorms are really going to deal that much damage that you need to sometimes stand in your own fire, and this is absolutely going to help you survive that you know, a little bit. I do want to mention on the one side that what's interesting here is that firestorms can damage you, but you can stand in your own starfall and not take damage. That is something that you can bear in mind if you ever have to choose between whichever one of the two you want to use, and you want to use the option that doesn't actually have a chance of damaging you, use starfall. If you don't give a shit and you're going thermonuclear, use firestorm, but just know that you're also going to take some damage. And when I say some, actually very little, again because of some trait choices that we're going to make just now. Last but not least, we take Bright Steel Ring. We have to take Bright Steel Ring if we want access to an actual dodge. If we don't take this, we will flop every time we dodge. So this is kind of like the, you know, the thing that makes this heavy armor work for us. Now, if you don't have Bright Steel Ring, you are going to have to make some changes to your armor and probably scale down to something that compromises your armor value a little bit, but gives you a lesser weight so you can actually dodge, because doesn't matter which build you have, you do still sometimes have to dodge, since most of the really difficult bosses have single, you know, shot kill mechanics that you kind of just have to avoid. You can't stand in it and just take it. And last but certainly not least, we have to look at the traits as mentioned. Of course, we're getting Flash Caster and Regrowth from our two archetypes. Then we do put 10 points into Fortify, which gives us 50% additional armor effectiveness, again just helping us reach this super high armor value of 363. And then we do put Kinship in here, and Kinship is in here for two reasons. First of all, to avoid situations where you burn yourself to death, as well as burning your minions to death. If you don't have this on, your firestorms are going to deal a huge amount of damage to your flyers or your reaver if it gets close to them, and it'll just wipe them out so fast. And if you don't have any minions on the battlefield, you're actually losing a huge amount of damage, so you want them to stay alive. The other reason why we also take Kinship, not just to protect ourselves and our minions, is also to protect our allies. So if you are playing this build in co-op, you have to take this. Trust me, you are going to be blowing your teammates the fuck up if you don't take this. And I mean, if that is your objective, then obviously don't take this. But otherwise, Kinship is super, you know, required for you to not essentially nuke your entire squad down. We also take swiftness here. I always take swiftness on all my builds because I want that 15% additional movement speed. We do give ourselves 30 additional HP here by putting 10 points into vigor. We have 1 point in endurance by default, and we have 3 points in spirit by default. We don't actually increase this mod generation here with spirit because we have so much of it coming from our gear already. However, if you don't have any of those rings that I was using that was increasing my mod generation, then what you can do is you can then put some extra traits in here and take some points from somewhere else and then put another ring in, and that might even it out a little bit. It won't be as good because 20% is not 50%, but at least it'll be a step in the right direction. And then for our last 3 here, we're taking amplitude because I said at the beginning very clearly, the aim of the game here is massive AOEs, and amplitude is going to increase our AOE size by 50%. It takes firestorm from like something that basically kills like a small room to something that covers the entire fucking, you know, like castle basically. I mean, it's not quite as good as that, but it really does increase the size of this, and then obviously also increases the size of the suck zone of the cyclone to just pull more stuff in so that you can kill it. It also does increase the size of the starfall radius as well, so that's another cool benefit of this. So this actually benefits both of our mods. We are using bark skin on here because this gives us 10% of damage reduction as well, just giving us a little bit more survivability. And then last but not least, one additional thing to give us also some survivability is Siphoner. We're left with 6 points after we've done all of this shit here. So these 6 points we put into Siphoner, which gives us 1.8% lifesteal. Now in the footage that you've been seeing running in the background, you can see that as soon as I shoot a firestorm or a starfall or both of them out, my health gains back so quick because of the damage that you're dealing, that as long as you keep those mods flying out, you really never run the risk of losing your life. And that's the build, I guess. I'm closing out the video today because I got a couple of things I want to say, but first and foremost, remember to play the game the way that you want to play it. Build this build or don't, it doesn't matter. Have fun playing Remnant 2, and remember that every single class and every single build in the game has a chance of being able to beat every boss in the game. It simply comes down to the skill at which you play. So taking in any other factor in here, fun absolutely matters, and you should be enjoying playing the game rather than forcing yourself to play a specific class or a specific weapon or a specific style and not have any fun doing it. I'm not doing the full measures long ass exit ditty. Enjoy your day, drink some beer, don't be so fucking serious. Cheers.